Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I want to give you guys a complete guide to Streamlabs OBS, showing you basically everything you need to know in order to start recording and streaming games using the tool. So Streamlabs OBS basically takes the original OBS version and adds some extra functionality to it, including the ability to add in themes, apps, and to tie in with Streamlabs itself. Streamlabs, if you have ever gone to the web interface, allows you to have things like stream alerts, donations, and a chatbot moderator. So in a nutshell, if you have any interest in using the Streamlabs features, then it makes sense to grab the Streamlabs version of OBS since it only adds to your features. So presumably most people who use Streamlabs are going to want to stream to platforms such as Twitch TV, YouTube, or Mixer. So to get things started, I'll go ahead and show you how to start the Twitch integration. So the first time you boot up Streamlabs OBS, it probably is going to ask you to log into a service so that you can authenticate with them and gain all the features tied into that service, such as using Twitch themes. But if you've already launched the application and you don't see that screen anymore, then one option you can do for the same authentication is click this login button at the bottom left-hand corner. So when you click login, it's going to ask you which platform you want to connect with. So you can see Twitch, YouTube, Mixer, and Facebook. So let's get started with Twitch TV. So when you click on Twitch TV, it's going to ask you to authenticate with the account, just like if you were logging onto the website with a new browser. So you have to go ahead, put in your password, and if you have a two-factor authentication set up, then you can go ahead and do that as well, which is a good way to secure your account, by the way. So let's go ahead and log in. So now that we're authenticated with Twitch, you may notice that on the left side, a lot of new icons appear, such as the Themes tab, which allows you to choose scene collections in order to theme your stream. Basically, these templates will create scenes with screens for stream starting while you're in the middle of streaming or playing a game, stream ending screens, and possibly a couple more depending on which one you pick. Now you might notice that most of these here say Prime at the top right corner. Which means that you do need to be subscribed to Twitch Prime in order to get access for those. However, if you want some free themes, you can take the search bar and type in free and search there. And then you'll be able to select from some of the themes which are completely free. So let's go ahead and install a template by left-clicking on it and then choosing Install Overlay. So what happens when you install the template is that a scene group will pop up in this right-hand section. So you can click on that and you can see the other scene groups which you may have. So the other day I installed this template called Stealth. And you can also have your own scene collections if you want to create completely custom scenes. So if you download a template and you don't want to modify it, it may be a good idea to switch to another scenes group for your own custom stuff. So when you use these templates, a bunch of sources will be set up for you by default. So sources are basically the items that you add to a scene, the scene being everything you see inside of this box, in order to create your complete visual setup. So that's going to include things such as having a follower count, a notification of the latest follower, your most recent donation, probably really important, an alert box for events that happen during your stream to pop up there. And some of these themes will put in a fake webcam, which would mean that you would need to click on this plus button later and add in a video source to replace that and center it on that area. Others would just go ahead and add the video capture device, basically a webcam, to the area where it belongs, and you may be able to see yourself already there. Now, as long as you're authenticated with Twitch and your Twitch account is linked to Streamlabs, then most of this stuff should just theoretically work. You can go to the Streamlabs interface on their website and run some of the test notifications if you want to make sure that alerts are popping up in the alert box. Aside from that, though, there may be certain things in your template that you need to go ahead and change. So for instance, the username field at the bottom of the screen, I can double click on that and change the username. So I could go ahead, take the text and put in Dark Skeleton here and then hit OK. And it should pop up on the screen. In this case, my name's kind of long, so I'm going to need to change another setting. I will go ahead, double click on it and reduce the font size by a bit, just making sure that everything pops in there properly. If for some reason all of the characters don't show up there, then you may need to double click it and change some of the properties such as the font size. I found that by shrinking and expanding it, the size of the text area just filled so that I can have that in at the end there. You can also manually click on any of these boxes to adjust the size of an element. So while trying not to select another element, we can just expand the size there and then recenter it where we need it on the screen, for instance. So if we click on the third icon on the top left, Cloudbot, we have access to another set of features. So Cloudbot will automatically scan through your Twitch chat in this case, and moderate it by picking up on what users say in chat. Now that can include things like preventing people from spamming all caps messages. It can prevent people from sending links to other websites unless you include them on a whitelist by using this command, !permit space name. But it can also do other things such as running polls on your stream. So if you want access to any of these tools, you simply need to toggle on the Cloudbot here. And then if you haven't done so already, you're going to want to make Streamlabs a moderator in your chat. And you can do that by going to dashboard.twitch.tv, finding your chat and typing in /mod Streamlabs and hit enter. And then you should see a message where you have given moderator privileges to Streamlabs so that the Cloudbot can work properly. And then the next tab when you link in with Twitch is the App Store. So personally speaking, I haven't seen much here that would be extremely useful. But if you want to try to integrate some of these apps into your stream, maybe it would be worth taking a look at something like a music player to see if you can get some music that you can use for your stream. But we'll leave the apps section at that for now. So just to go through the process one more time, but now showing how to integrate with YouTube instead of Twitch, let's click on Logout in the bottom left. And now let's log in with YouTube instead. So it's basically the same process. You just go log into your Google account and click on the YouTube channel, which is relevant. And then you're logged in with essentially the same set of features. Of course, the mini feed is going to reflect your YouTube channel subscriptions rather than your followers on Twitch now. The themes that you find here are still the ones that you get off of Twitch Prime, but once again, you can always search for free themes by typing in the word free and hitting enter. Likewise, the apps are the same as well. However, when it comes to enabling the Cloudbot, you can see that the way to make it a moderator is a little bit different. So if you want to make Cloudbot work for YouTube, then you need to enable it here and then copy this channel name and go to YouTube community settings. So if you click on the YouTube community settings button, you can take this link here and hit Control-C to copy it and hit Control-V in moderators in order to add this channel in as a moderator for the channel. Then you need to select Streamlabs when it gives you a drop-down list and hit save. And then the Cloudbot should work for YouTube as well. Now next, let's talk about recording videos. So first off, if you want to do a simple recording to a file, the option to do that is the recording button down here in the bottom right. It says REC in red letters. If however you want to go live and stream to the service you are connected to, as in take your live video footage and put it out there on the internet, then you can hit the go live button. So assuming that your Twitch account has been linked with Streamlabs, one of the things that you're going to want to do to make sure that everything's working properly before you go live is to test your widgets. So you might notice in the bottom right hand corner there is an option for this called Test Widgets. Let's go ahead and click on that, and then we can see what's going to happen on our screen when these following events happen. So a really typical one would be a follow. So if we have a follow, you can see here, Streamlabs is going to show its little character animation here, and this is something you can select on the website when you log in. And then you can see the person who follows. Likewise, we can go ahead and do subscription to see what happens when someone describes. Click on donation to see what happens when someone donates, and so on and so forth. And what you see here is customized on the Streamlabs website, not inside of Streamlabs OBS itself. So when you actually start using Streamlabs OBS, one of the first things you're really going to want to know about, aside from the Twitch and YouTube integration, is going to be how do you actually stream and go live. Well, in the bottom right hand section, you can see the options for that. REC is for record, which is going to mean recording to a file on your computer. If you only hit record, it's actually not going to be streaming live onto the internet. And obviously, in cases like this video, there are legitimate reasons why you would want to only record and not to actually go live. However, if you do want to start streaming whatever is inside of your scene, then you can hit the go live button, and you can also use these in conjunction with each other. So you can hit go live and then hit record if you want to start streaming and then start recording to a video file. It's totally legitimate to do that at the same time. In fact, if we go up to the settings menu, there's an option where you can have both of those occur whenever you start streaming. So if we click on the settings icon and then we go to the general tab, scroll down a bit to this output section, you can check automatically record when streaming, and you can also check keep recording when stream stops. So that way, whenever you go live, you're going to be recording, and even after you stop streaming, it will keep recording, which might be important if you happen to lose a connection to the stream, but you still want to catch the video information Maybe it takes you a couple minutes to realize that your stream is actually down, but you still want to have those in-between moments recorded. So having these two options checked is usually a good idea. You can also go to the hotkeys tab of the settings, and you can set hotkeys for starting recording or starting and stopping streaming. So what I will usually put in for start recording and stop recording is Alt-Control-R. However, I don't typically set anything for start streaming or stop streaming, since I prefer to explicitly do that by pressing the Go Live button in the bottom right hand corner. Okay, so next let's talk a little bit about the recording and streaming settings that you may want to use. Essentially, I just pulled my main settings from the NVIDIA recording guide for online streaming. So if you look on nvidia.com for the broadcasting guide, that'll have essentially the same kind of information. So if you want to customize things, you can go to the Output tab. You'll notice first off, I have it set to advanced mode. So if you want to have more control over the exact settings, you can do advanced mode, though it's certainly not required. But if you're going to copy my settings, then I take my encoder and I set it to NVENC, the NVIDIA encoder. Generally speaking, the idea is that's going to get better results than a X264 software encoder in terms of the efficiency for your computer to be running this software. For the streaming rate control, I'll leave that set to CBR, constant bitrate. So that's going to mean that whatever your bitrate is set to, it's always going to try to put that amount of information out to Twitch TV or whichever streaming service at a given second. So this is measured in kilobits per second. So 6,000 kilobits per second is 6 megabits per second, which is about 0.75 megabytes. There's 8 bits in a byte, so you just divide by 8 to get that result. And then the rest I basically leave to defaults, having keyframe interval set to auto, preset to quality, profile high. And later we'll talk about audio tracks. So for streaming, I use audio track 1, but if we jump over to the recording tab, that you'll actually see that I have the audio tracks checked for 2 and 3. So the reason for doing this is that you can actually separate your desktop audio and your microphone audio. If you have one outputting to channel 2, one outputting to channel 3, and then for streaming, you just combine them both. So you have both your desktop audio and your microphone audio output to track 1. That way you split it for your computer recording, but all of the audio information goes to your stream. We'll talk about that more later, but aside from that, I also use MKV recording format because that does support multiple audio checks. And in other versions of OBS, they do mention the advantage of MKV over MP4 is that theoretically, if an MP4 file is recording and the program were to crash, you might have some corruption of your data. But apparently that's not the case with MKV. I've never really run into that problem, but any format you record to, you can just change that into a different recording format if your video editor requires it. So you can do MKV and then change that into MP4 inside of OBS. And so even if MKV might not be supported by every video editor, it's possible to just change the format into MP4 after it's done recording. So there's really not much to lose by using MKV as long as you're willing to remux the recording into a different format. For the recording encoder, I of course use NVIDIA encoder, and note I'm using the new version rather than the original. For the rate control, I've been setting it to VBR for variable bitrate. Obviously, I do a lot of screencast videos, so there's often not a lot of information on the screen, and therefore having a low base bitrate and having a high maximum bitrate allows OBS to record to a smaller file size while still increasing the amount of data going into a frame if something more dramatic happens than just moving the mouse cursor around and clicking on the screen. The NVIDIA Broadcaster Guide also recommends CQP as a good option, though I've noticed that the file sizes tend to be higher for that. And one more thing, the bitrate on the streaming tab, you can see that I have it set to 6,000. If you go to the recording guide for Twitch TV, then you'll find that the current max bitrate is set to 6,000. That's why I use 6,000 as the bitrate rather than something higher. YouTube and Mixer have higher maximum bitrates, but obviously if the streaming service doesn't support a higher bitrate, it doesn't make a lot of sense to be sending them more data than they're willing to process. Also note that you do have to have an internet connection which is capable of processing this amount of data. Now, 6,000 bitrate is not that high. You can go to sites like speedtest.net to find what your upload bitrate is. Convert it from megabytes per second or megabits per second into kilobits per second. And then as long as you keep the converted number about 20 or 30% higher than whatever your upload bitrate is here, you should be fine. You just want to leave a little bit of a buffer so that OBS isn't taking up all of your internet bandwidth for upload, or you may run into some choppiness issues with your stream. If you have any issues with your stream, if you click in the bottom left-hand corner, you get performance notifications here. So if your settings are set too high for your computer for some reason and you get these kind of problems, Streamlabs OBS will basically just let you know. So just keep an eye on this the first couple times you run your stream and make sure that your settings don't have any real problems. Now note, you can also click on these live stats in order to view the information which is relevant in real time, such as how much of your computer processing power is being taken up by OBS. You can see how many frames per second you're getting in your recording. So you probably want this to be consistent. So if you have your recording set to 30 FPS, you want it to be 30. And if you have it set to 60 FPS, you're going to want it to be 60 FPS. Dropped frames ideally should be 0. And the bandwidth here should be around the amount you set. So if you set it to 6,000 kilobits per second for upload streaming, then you want to see roughly 6,000 show up here. And if all of those are good, then you're probably okay. But obviously check your live dashboard on the relevant sites, Twitch TV, YouTube, Mixer, and make sure that on the other end, on the actual website, that your viewers are receiving the video as you mean for it to be streamed. One more thing regarding recording. You can see in the recording tab of output that there is this recording path here. So whenever you start recording to a file on your computer, the recording path is going to be used for where those files get saved. So if you start recording and you're wondering where those files went, well, it's going to be in this path. So obviously you can hit browse and change it to a different location on your computer. But if you're wondering where your file saved to, this is going to be the spot. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the UI in more detail. So in this middle section, you have your recording preview window. Whatever is seen here is what is going to be shown in the recording or streamed live to the various services you may be streaming to. So if I was to click on the different scenes here and switch between them while I was recording, then what would actually happen is that it would switch to those scenes and this would show up in the recording. Now, one way that you can transition between your scenes without having to manually click on them like this is to use studio mode. So with studio mode, you can select a transition on either side and you can transition between them. So if you hit this transition button, it's going to be doing some transition, moving the scene on the left to the scene on the right. Now, by default, it's just a cut where it instantly switches, but we can change that to a better transition by clicking on Edit Scene Transitions. So now we can take the transition type here, clicking on Edit, and change this from cut to something like fade or fade to color. Fade, it will have it shift into the other screen over a short period of time. So let's do that one more time. And you can see that's a lot more subtle than just sharply cutting. And we could also try one of the other ones. So swipe left. Let's go ahead and try that. Transition. You can see that the scene that was on the right slides out to the left and the new screen pops in there. Now, especially if you're working on one monitor and you're the one streaming, it's going to be pretty hard to go in here and to switch between your scenes without it being very awkward. So you can actually click on the settings and go to hotkeys and set up some key combinations if you'd like, in order to make these kind of things just a button press away. So you can have transition set, basically hitting this button effectively, and you can put a key combination for that. For any scenes that you've set up, you can scroll down, find the scene name, and you can set an option for, let's say, switch to scene. So let's do Control-Alt-3 here, hit OK, and then I hit Control-Alt-3. And then you'll see that while we're in studio mode, it queues up that scene to be on the left side here. So now we just need a hotkey to transition it to the live scene. So let's go to hotkeys here, and then we can do studio mode transition, and I'll do Control-Alt-0 to make that the key combination to do a transition. And then with Control-Alt-0, we can slide the current scene off while bringing in the new one that we queued up. So likewise, if we were to hotkey select one of the other scenes, then we can bring that in here and then Control-Alt-0 and then slide that onto the scene. So hopefully you can see how this gets kind of handy. Of course, you don't have to use studio mode. So if you just want to immediately switch between them, you can turn off studio mode, which is also hotkeyable. And then if you want to switch to a new scene, you can just hit your key combination for it. So Control-3 switches to the starting soon option. Note that it did do the transition. The difference is that it doesn't queue it up to be ready to switch. It just does it immediately. So if we click on the scene transitions option, you can customize it just like it was in studio mode, and you're good to go. The other relevant UI elements include the mini feed over here on the left. So when you have events happening in your stream, it will show up here. And the exact things that you decide you want to show up can be modified by clicking on this pop out event filtering options tool. So you can see by default, pretty much everything is enabled. So you can see resubs, general donations, merge follows, different subscriber tiers. And so the main point is that while you're streaming, you may pop this out to another window or have this on another monitor. And you can just look at this feed in order to see and respond to the different things that are happening. So for instance, if someone were to subscribe to your channel, you can see that pop up there and you'd be able to respond to it with the standard, "Hey, thanks for subscribing to my channel. That's a big help. Awesome. Thanks, dude." Then to the right of that in the default layout, we have the scene groups. So this is very handy when you are dealing with themes that you download from the store, because there's a decent chance you're going to want to have different scenes for your stream in order to switch between. So if you want to temporarily hide everything because you're not in the middle of the game or you're taking a break, then you could just go to the be right back screen and then come back, re-enable your microphone or whatever, and then you're good to go. Now, when you switch between your scenes, you'll probably notice that each of them have a unique set of sources in this bottom left-hand corner. So the sources, once again, are what adds everything to the screen in order for your viewers to see. So that can include things like the name of your channel, how many subscribers you have on your channel, who the latest donator is, your webcam as an important one, and you may notice that a lot of these items actually have framing around them. So that would generally be done with a framing image or an overlay. So for instance, this whole bottom thing, we have the top donation, the latest donation, latest subscriber pop-up. If I was to hide this header, you would notice that basically all of that information gets hidden because that's actually just an image file that shows up there at that particular part of the screen. Now, of course, you can add in custom sources. So if you hit the plus button, you'll get a huge list of sources that you can add onto your scenes. So the standard stuff over here is not streaming specific. So that can include things like an image if you want to show a logo, or an overlay like I was just talking about. There's also things like browser source if you want to show a web browser on your screen. Display capture if you want to show your entire desktop, including the start menu, the taskbar, every window on your screen, everything. Game capture, which is handy because it can pick up on full screen games and make that automatically viewed on the screen without you necessarily having to select it for each individual game. Though with game capture, you can have it select specific games. So for instance, if I click on it and I go to add source, you give each source a name, and then it gives you settings for those sources. So for instance, instead of auto mode, you can capture any full screen application, or you can capture a specific window. And with window, you can select options that are open on your computer. So this doesn't necessarily have to be a game 100%, but if you add something open like StarCraft or Overwatch or Hearthstone, then you can just select that window. And then whenever you have the game open, it'll try to match that. And if it can find a match, then it will show on your screen. And then for any source that you're going to add, you just hit done after you do all the settings. You make sure it shows up on the screen properly, and then you can adjust it by moving it around the screen. So if you select any source that is around your screen, either through the list of sources or clicking on it directly, then you can left click and move it around. You can left click on the squares that are at each of the 9 sections of the box. You can stretch it. By default, it keeps the same aspect ratio, but if you hold Alt down, you can stretch it in one direction rather than both. And naturally, you can just move it to where you need it to be on the screen. You also kind of notice that it does try to snap to other sources, so that is really handy when you are trying to do things like make a webcam fit the image source. So if I move this around, it's going to just kind of snap into place. So in the add sources, you have the rest of your standard sources, and you also have the widgets, which are tying directly to your Streamlabs account. So if you want a feature of Streamlabs, such as the alert box to show, or your follower goals, or how much money has donated to your donation goal, all that kind of stuff, you can have each of these show up on screen as a widget. and these will tie into your Streamlabs account. And then in the bottom right hand section, you have the audio mixer here. So by default, you're probably going to see desktop audio and microphone auxiliary. So desktop audio is going to be the sound that is coming out of your computer to whatever your output device is, which is generally going to be either speakers or a headphone set. The microphone is your audio input. So for instance, I'm talking into a HyperX Quadcast right now. And whenever I talk, as I have been for this whole video, you can see my microphone levels are showing up here. So one way to know if your microphone is working or not is, are you getting some audio levels here? Now that we're talking about microphone audio, it makes sense to talk a little bit about audio filters. So if you want to add an audio filter to try to improve the final sound of your microphone, then you can click on this icon here in the bottom right hand and do filters. So when you open up the filters menu, there's this plus sign, which allows you to add a filter. And so one filter I almost always have on when I'm using OBS is noise suppression. So if I go ahead and hit done here, then the noise suppression filter gets added in, and all we need to do to control this is to choose the suppression level. With my microphones, I have pretty much always found that just setting it to -60 gets the best results, and that removes a lot of the background noise. Now you won't hear any difference because I'm not actually recording using these settings right here. I'm recording in the original version of OBS. But that's how you can add in an audio filter. And note that when you are adding in audio filters, that if you download any external plugins, known as a VST audio plugin, that you can actually use outside tools in order to modify your audio inside of OBS. So you might find something useful out there like a plosives filter to reduce the popping sound when you speak too clearly, when you speak too closely into the microphone. Or you might find something like Reaper filters, which gives you a more advanced way of reducing some of the background noise, among many other things. Reaper filters is kind of a package. But we'll leave it at that for now. Just having noise suppression at -60 is usually going to be pretty good by itself. So a while ago, I talked about splitting the audio into 2 separate audio tracks so that when you're editing your video that you've recorded to a file, you can actually edit your desktop audio and your microphone audio independently of each other. When you see the output streaming tab in the settings, you'll see here I have it set to audio track 1. And this is a drop down menu because you can only have one audio track while you're streaming to a service, Twitch or YouTube, just the nature of how streaming works. So I will use audio track 1 as my streaming audio track. And then on recording, I have audio tracks 2 and 3 checked. So with recorded files, if you are using MKV or MP4 formats, you can have multiple audio tracks contained in one recorded file. So if you set this up, 1 can be streaming, 2 can be microphone, and then 3 can be desktop audio, or however you prefer. You can go ahead and hit OK there. And then in the audio mixer, you click for advanced settings. And you can see here this section called tracks. So this is determining for each of these audio devices, which audio tracks should it be outputting to. So the way I will set this up is uncheck microphone for everything except 1 and 2, desktop audio, uncheck everything except for 1 and 3. And now you can see that the alert box and the chat box are set to monitor only. So you really don't need to worry about this audio duplicating with the desktop audio. But I don't see any need to actually leave them on for the desktop audio channels anyway. So I'll just uncheck all of those. And for webcam, I will change that to monitor only because we're not going to use the webcam microphone if we had one. We're going to use the actual microphone auxiliary device. Also, we can remove track 1 from this list because those are monitor only devices anyway. Now, if you have them set to monitor only, you don't technically need to remove them over here, but if you have them removed both places, then they're definitely never going to accidentally show up on your recorded audio, except in the sense of being part of the desktop audio. So let's close that. And one more thing to note here is if you want to select your microphone. So the microphone is able to be selected in the settings. So if you click on settings, you can go to audio and you can choose your desktop audio device and your microphone auxiliary device. So unless you have a reason to change it, you can probably just leave desktop audio device set to default, which is going to be your computer system default, which is going to give you whatever your system audio device is also going to be the one that gets used in OBS, which is fine. For microphone auxiliary device, I want to make sure that this is always recording with the correct microphone, so I will manually set this to the HyperX Quadcast to make sure it doesn't accidentally use a different device. You can see that You can actually have multiple desktop audio devices and multiple microphones, but for most users, you really aren't going to need to worry about that. It would be a lot more relevant if you were doing a podcast with multiple microphones, then you would want to select those. Okay, so we've talked about these different boxes on the screen, and I need to apologize a little bit because I think I'm actually not using the original layout for Streamlabs OBS. So you can customize your layout by clicking on the layout editor, and when you do that, you can choose from one of the different default layouts. Here in the top left, I believe this is the original one. You can have the editor's display, the preview window, the mini feed, the scene selector, the source selector, and the audio mixer. So these two options actually have all of the same things, but you can see that the layout is a little bit different. They make the mini feed very wide here. But in the one we've had selected for this video, each of the 4 bottom sections have the same sizing. Now you can switch between these, and you can also swap out the different elements that are going to show up on your layout to something else. So this is a 6-panel layout, so if you wanted another option, you can pop in something like website here. Perhaps for website, the one you would want to have shown up here would be either your streaming dashboard or your Streamlabs dashboard. And of course, you can swap around which element is going to go where, so you could just set this up for yourself however you'd like it to be. You can have an in-game overlay while you're using Streamlabs OBS. So if you click on settings, you'll see game overlay here. You can enable the in-game overlay, which will allow you to have things such as your chat in your streaming service. So for instance, your Twitch chat, recent events to show on the screen, and you can control the overlay opacity if you want it to be more or less visible. Basically, you can add partial transparency to it by lowering this down. If you lower it to 50%, then it's half transparent. If you toggle positioning mode, that allows you to customize where everything is going to appear on the screen. So if you're playing a game, this is handy, especially if you're working on one monitor. Then you can have these things appear on the screen just for you, and you can see that and respond to it while you're playing the game. So this is obviously going to be a really handy tool for a lot of people. Of course, when you're done positioning everything, toggle off the positioning mode, and you can hit done. So this has been my video on basically everything you need to know to get started recording and streaming videos with OBS, the Streamlabs version, Streamlabs OBS. So I hope you guys got a lot out of this video. Have fun recording and streaming your content online. I've been Chris, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in my future video content.